Back in 2019, the world was absolutely rocked by one of the most disturbing scandals of our time. It was all centered on one man, Jeffrey Epstein, and he would end up pulling back the curtain on some incredibly dark secrets, all hidden behind a wall of money and power.
You see, on the surface, Jeffrey Epstein was this larger-than-life billionaire financier. His world was all private jets, sprawling mansions, and a contact list that was just mind-blowing. We're talking politicians, presidents, royalty, famous scientists, you name it. He was a man with serious influence.
But what was hiding just beneath that polished surface? Well, that was a truly shocking allegation, that Epstein was the mastermind behind a massive, global sex trafficking network. And when thousands of sealed documents were finally released, we all started to see just how big this operation really was. This whole story is just filled with mysteries and controversies that honestly are still unanswered today. So the big question is, how did a guy with this much power fall so hard, so fast? And what did we learn when his world finally came crashing down?
Okay, so to really get this, we have to start with the man himself. Let's dig into the very strange and unlikely rise of Jeffrey Epstein, because his backstory is a mystery all on its own. His career path was, well, it was bizarre, to say the least. Get this, Epstein drops out of college, but somehow lands a job teaching math at a super elite private school. Then, he makes this incredible leap into high finance at Bear Stearns. But the real game changer? Becoming the financial manager for Leslie Wexner, the billionaire behind L Brands. That move basically gave him the keys to a kingdom, and it's what shot him into the global stratosphere. And once he had the money, the power followed. Epstein built this incredible web of influence, and it was really held up by three main pillars: his super secretive money, his network of elite friends, and his portfolio of luxury properties that were, as it turns out, the backdrop for his whole operation.
So let's talk about the money, because it's one of the biggest question marks in this whole saga. You know, most billionaires, you can kind of track where their money comes from. Public companies, investment records, that sort of thing. Not Epstein. His wealth was a black box. He ran this ultra-secretive firm called the Financial Trust Company. And the story was he only managed money for other billionaires. But since no one knows who those clients were, where his huge fortune actually came from is still a major mystery. And his network? It was staggering. I mean, through the 90s and 2000s, you see him photographed with pretty much everyone who was anyone. We're talking presidents like Bill Clinton and Donald Trump, royalty like Prince Andrew, and even tech titans like Bill Gates. The list just goes on and on. Now, this is super important to point out. Just because someone was photographed with Epstein or was in his contacts does not mean they were involved in any crimes. Association is not guilt. But let's be real, having that kind of network absolutely gave him a shield of credibility, and that was totally central to how he operated. You've probably heard about his infamous Black Book, right? Well, this thing was basically a map of his entire world. It was a contact directory that investigators found, and it had thousands of names and numbers. CEOs, world leaders, celebrities, lawyers. It was a blueprint of his global influence. Epstein's power was also broadcast through his properties. And these weren't just houses. They were basically command centers. He had a gigantic mansion in Manhattan, a huge estate down in Palm Beach, and, of course, the most infamous of all, his private Caribbean island, Little St. James. All three of these places would later become central locations in the stories told by his victims. Because what was really happening behind the closed doors of these glamorous places, according to prosecutors, was a horrifying and methodical system of abuse. According to court documents and the victims who bravely came forward, the recruitment pattern was chillingly simple. It would start with teenage girls being approached and offered money for what were described as massages. Then, those girls would often be encouraged to recruit their own friends, which created this horrible pyramid-like system that just kept feeding the network of abuse. And a central figure in this whole system, allegedly, was Ghislaine Maxwell. She was a British socialite and one of Epstein's closest associates for years. The accusation against her was that she was the one recruiting and grooming the young victims, using her status to make it all happen. Then you have the private jets, which got that notorious nickname, the Lolita Express. These planes were used to fly people between his properties. Flight logs later came out, but authorities have been really clear that just being on a flight log isn't proof of any wrongdoing. For years, this whole thing was operating just under the radar. But eventually, the law started to catch up.
And that kicked off a chain of events that would bring Epstein's entire world crashing down.
The timeline here is pretty wild. The first police investigation actually kicked off way back in 2005, but it led to this incredibly controversial plea deal in 2008, where he only served 13 months. It wasn't until 2019 that he was finally rearrested on federal sex trafficking charges. And while Epstein never faced that trial, Ghislaine Maxwell was convicted in 2021 and sentenced to 20 years in prison. But then, just before he could face that federal trial, the whole story took its most shocking turn yet. In August 2019, Jeffrey Epstein was found dead in his jail cell. The official cause of death was ruled a suicide, but the circumstances immediately sparked a firestorm of controversy. I mean, the 2 guards on duty were asleep, security cameras somehow malfunctioned, and he had just been taken off suicide watch. These facts just fueled speculation all over the world. Epstein's death meant a trial would never happen, and it left us with these huge, gaping questions that honestly still haunt this case today. First off, the money. Without him ever testifying, we may never know where his vast and still partially unexplained fortune really came from. And tied to that, who were the secret billionaire clients he was supposedly working for? Their identities are still one of the biggest secrets in this entire scandal. And maybe the most important question of all, especially for the victims, was the network even bigger? Were there other powerful people involved? Other collaborators who just never got charged? And of course, the one that everyone still talks about, what really happened inside that federal jail cell? The massive security failures that night are still the subject of intense debate. At the end of the day, this whole case showed the world a really uncomfortable truth about how power and wealth can sometimes seem to operate in a totally different reality, almost above the law. But it was the incredible courage of the victims that finally dragged some of this truth into the light. Because Epstein died before he could ever stand trial, a lot of secrets died with them, which guarantees that one of the darkest scandals in modern history will always be defined by the questions we can no longer answer.